No, they go 3, 2.
No. They start from 5 and then they go down and they go quiet. Gives you full 3 seconds. Hey, what's going on, world? We got the Lighting Amigos back here, episode 3. We're continuing our series on the 7 deadly sins. Of course, we stole this from Nate. Nate's been teaching the 7 deadly sins for a minute, probably longer than I've been alive. So let's continue on with the 3rd deadly sin. The 3rd deadly sin is corrosion and wicking on wires, primarily due to improper materials. So let's dig in and chat on this, because this is something we see in the field all the time. Matt, tell me, have you ever gone in the field, someone else's install, and seen just an improper connection that caused wires to go to crap?
Oh, hell yeah. I've been on my own installs, my own team's installs, and had my heart broken when I see, connections with not even in a direct burial tube, or, even, who needs a copper crimp? We'll just, twist them together and hope for the best. So yeah, I mean, it's one of the hardest things to see, because it's such an easy thing to fix. And it can be hard to, even get your guys to understand the importance of it, because they can save 30 seconds a fixture. And in their mind, a lot of times that's helping the company by going faster, when in reality, we all know we're going to be back, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or, a year later, because those are going to be wicked and the wires will be black. I've seen it on others installs and my own.
So when I was a lighting contractor, before you were born, Shane, just to make that point again, I would literally, when I was talking to a client, most jobs that I did, I ripped out existing, lighting that was put in by a landscaper, or maybe they bought it at Home Depot, and I would literally reach down into the ground, pull up the connection, and take the wire nut off, because everybody uses wire nuts. And every time, I don't think it failed me one time that it wasn't wicked and corroded. So you just do it right in the client's house. And there's been videos that I've shot. I don't do a lot of videos. I do a lot of Facebook or Instagram, any of that stuff I need to. But I would go on commercial projects and do the same thing. It's kind of fun, because, universally, for whatever reason, like you said, Matt, things just don't get done properly. Now, a lot of it's due to the manufacturer. I got a message today about somebody found some new connection from China. It's one of those clamp on over the wire, right? Run your home around, run your wire from the fixture, clamp it on, no dielectric grease, no nothing, stupidest connection in the world. And
Matt and I call those vampire plug connections. It's just a fancier version of that for low voltage lighting. Long story short, well, don't use those either, right? That's just a way to do things quicker in the wrong way. Like, take the extra 3 minutes and do it right. We went to a job maybe 3 weeks ago, and it was just wire nuts and electrical tape. And it is not the first time we've seen that. It just blows my mind that someone would even do that. But you take off the wire nut, and out of the 60 strands of copper on a 12-2, there's like 2 little hairs left. Everything else was completely corroded. Well, no wonder your lights aren't working. We had to replace all of her wire, redo all the connections. Just poor lady. If the guys just took an extra 30 minutes and spent $30, like her system would have lasted over a decade.
Yeah, talking about that guy right there, though, this is part of the issue in the industry, right? Is so many people just go slam lights in the ground, call themselves a landscape lighting guy. Oh, I'm going to do a design for you, and they're just slamming lights in the ground. They have no idea what they're doing. They have no training. They don't even know that the wire nut and electrical tape is bad, because usually the only electrical, the average person's been doing is inside your house, where you do, right? You're going to use a wire nut. It's inside. So they're just doing what they know, or what the guy at the supply house told them to do. So it's a lot of times, I don't even think it's them trying to do a shortcut. I think they just don't know. They think they're doing it correctly, because they have never been told differently.
Nate, question for you, because you have the electrical contractor background. I've seen, or at least I feel like, electricians, when they're installing landscape lights, they just know to use wire nuts, which is acceptable on 120, but not acceptable on low voltage. So 2 questions. if as you as an electrician, do you know better not to do that? Not you as a low voltage guy. Should electricians know better? And then I guess my second question is, well, I lost my train of thought. But Nate, as an electrician, why do electricians do that?
So electricians, you know, and I'm going to defend the electrician for a minute, but I'm also going to throw them under the bus. Electricians, that's all they use is wire nuts. I mean, in the electrical industry, which everybody knows is a massive industry, there's all through the years, people try to come out with better stab and, you know, go connectors and all this stuff. And everything typically fails with the exception of the wire nuts. So wire nuts are just super inherently, everybody has them, we use them. Now, to defend the electrician, the electrical side, we can go all the way from tiny little baby grays to tiny blues to oranges to yellows to reds to big blues. So there's at least 6 to 7 different ranges of different type of wire nuts because there is no wire nut made, and typically red is the one everybody uses. Well, red typically is not made to go from 12 wire down to 18. You would have to go to a yellow or an orange. So that's one of the faults of wire nuts, is that you're trying to capture tiny little wire with bigger wire and it never works. We've all taken a wire and we've been spinning, and you think just because it's spin around, it's really good. But when you do a wire nut correctly, I should have been more prepared. I should have had one. When you get it tight, it will literally start twisting the wire and you will twist the wire. That's when you know it's good. So trying to find one wire nut universally, that is 100% impossible. Can't be done. No one does it, which is why there's so many of them. So a decent electrician will never use a red when a yellow is appropriate. Will never use a yellow when an orange is appropriate. So wire nuts. Now the other problem with wire nuts is wire nuts are made for electrical on the inside. So when you take stranded wire on the inside, you know, it only has like 7 strands in it. They're really big. Or when you go 12-2 on the outside, it's 64 strands. So when you got two 12 twos together, which you'd have an in and an out, that's 168 strands. That's a lot of goddamn copper wire you're trying to capture and get it, which is why I hate wire nuts. I mean, we should have started off the topic of wicking and corrosion, faulty material, improper installation, and it's always the connection. I can't tell you how many thousands of guys have called me trying to blame things on anybody, the manufacturer, the wire nut, to this, to that. And it's like, look yourself in the mirror. Your guys did a faulty connection. There's a reason it's always the connection. So connections, I will preach if you ever come into my installations, it's always the connection. Nothing is more important. And when you have the proper tools and do it correctly, it isn't 3 minutes of connection. It's probably 1 minute of connection. So to do it properly is really faster than improper, and then you don't have a callback. But yeah, wire nuts, I hate them.
Do electricians, are they taught that, hey, wire nuts are going to cause wires to wick on low voltage and not on high voltage?
So technically, we're not taught anything on the outside. You know, I mean, electricians typically are inside, and anything that is done on the outside is usually on, you know, 110, 220, 277 type stuff. It's in conduit. Everything's in boxes. So we typically, I mean, when I was electrical contractor, I mean, typically, I don't think I ever ran low voltage one time in the sense that we do it today for landscape lighting, which is direct burial and connections in the ground. I mean, fundamentally, as you two know, I don't like, you know, connections in the ground can only be at the fixture. If anything else is outside of the fixture, we meaning more than 4 inches from the fixture, everything's in a box, a hub, you know, something that I can find and protect the connection. So, you know, electricians in that regard won't do the half-ass shit that these landscape contractors are literally taught, which Matt hit it on the head. A lot of times it's not the fault of the landscaper or the installer. It's the distributor for their lack of information. It's the manufacturers for their lack of information. So people out there teaching the wrong techniques and types and use of material, it's really terrible.
So gotta love Nate for his long, thorough answers, which you make me think of another question. So if low voltage, obviously you don't want to do a direct burial with the wire nut, but say you're in the soffit and you're doing downlights, is there a point in time where a wire nut would be acceptable in a low voltage install?
So you could almost say, what's the difference between a butt connector, a wire nut, right? As long as you have dielectric grease and it's in some type of a secured tube or container, which obviously a wire nut's only a container. So yeah, it could be acceptable. for me, the hinging fact is how ugly does it look? Does it look unprofessional? So if you were going to look up under a soffit and see two wires into a big old red wire nut, that would be unacceptable to me because it would look like shitty installation, and I would not do it. So to me, I have to hide everything. Everything that has to be look like it was never touched. It has to blend in. But would it work as long as you had dielectric grease? Well, again, we have to get back to what I said earlier about the right wire nut. If you could choose the right wire nut, be methodical, make sure you're doing it correctly, which is probably very difficult. Yeah, I mean, mechanically, you'd probably be okay.
Yeah, and I just want to, clarify, make sure. But it's not really the fact that it's low voltage versus line voltage. It's the fact of where our connections are going in the ground, not in a box. I mean, if there's plenty of line voltage ran outside that's inside of weather tight boxes, right? And they have wire nuts inside. So it's not really the line versus low. Is that correct? Right? It's just basically our method of not putting it in junction boxes, weather tight.
Well, I think in the spirit of the question Shane was asking how I took it, it's, my answer was it's really because the wire nut was made for line voltage wire and stranded has 8 strands and typically use solid wire. So there's one. So now you got one wire to one wire or 8 to 8 to 16, where again, 12-2 is 64 strands. It's 128 strands. Those wire nuts were not made to capture 128 strands. They just weren't. That's why there's so many meltdowns. I mean, meltdowns are everywhere. So that's why I hate wire nuts. You like to use a mechanical crimp, just a copper crimp that every electrician uses on every job because they use a copper crimp to crimp the copper together. You can use that same technique and use a T&B Buchanan 4-pronger mechanism. Again, I apologize. I should have had one with me. But in my defense, I'm up in my mountain house, and I didn't bring any tools or tricks with me. But anyway, so that's why the copper crimp works, because it can mechanically crush and compress 360 degrees around from a 4-point anchor position to be able to really crush those 128 wires. Let alone you stick some 18-2s in there and throw in a 14-2. So mechanical connections are the best, bar none, and then you just have to pick out the container that captures and holds all the dielectric. So,
well, nice. Matt, must be nice to have 5 different homes all over the world.
Doesn't everybody?
Totally normal, yeah.
Mountain homes, lake homes, desert homes, sure.
I also want to talk about, because we've talked about, I said about how the guys think they're saving time. I think we've all said something similar to the guys installing it, think they're saving time. But if they look at, it's short-sighted, right? If you look at the big picture, I was talking to Nate the other day, the go-backs are the worst. I'd rather have an extra 2 hours on-site day of install, and it doesn't take that long to do the proper connections, rather than having to go back. I'm like, oh, here's a bad connection. Because unfortunately, when you have to do the go-backs because of bad connection or improper install, it's not like they all fail at the same exact time. So it's like multiple trips back and forth. You're not saving yourself time. You're not saving yourself money by doing a shortcut now. It just, if you plan on being in landscape lighting, you're going to maintenance, right? I'd much rather do it right, be on site, spend my time there. And then when I go back, just clean the fixtures and add, rather than looking for where the bad connection is, because it's always the connection somewhere.
So one of the first things I learned as an electrical contractor, which was driven into my brain by people yelling at me, there's always enough time to do it right the second time, but never enough time to do it right the first time. So whenever you want to take these stupid shortcuts, it's like you just said, man, if you have one bad connection, you're going to have 20 bad connections. So you're going to have 20 fucking trips going back and forth. So yeah, we just got to teach people to do it right, and knowing that it's the number one problem on a landscape lighting job is the connection. Have to do it perfect.
All right. Well, I'll leave this topic. I'm going to move on to the next. But just to kind of summarize, if you out there, the listener, are the type of person that's using wire nuts, electrical tape, or some form of a vampire connection, you're doing it wrong. Take it from the smartest guy in the industry, Nate. So correct way, connect your wires, copper crimp, get the 4-way crimp and crimp it, put it in some kind of a grease tube.
Hey, right? Shane, can I ask you this? Can you put a link at the end of the video so they can go to the proper techniques on a connection?
100%. We've got a
Okay.
video, we've got even better. So we've got a video showing you exactly how you should make the proper connection. I'll write that down before I forget, because I will forget. So next, corrosion, can happen, outside of the connection just by using an improper fixture, the improper material around a fixture. I don't do very many coastal installs, right? I'm in San Antonio. I don't even think, Nate, maybe when you're closer to San Diego, is this kind of a thing? What kind of material do you stay away from when you're close to salt water?
You talk about wanting me to give a long, thorough answer. Do we have
No,
about
no, no.
25 minutes? So I want
Quick,
a quick
30-second answer.
answer. All right, but before I go into that harsh environment, because I typically think that that's what you want me to answer. You're in a coastal area, it's a coastal environment, which I would deem as a harsh environment. I want to just go back for 1 second about, the topic started off with corrosion for bad connections. The other thing that can happen is wicking. So a lot of times guys can do an improper connection, and maybe the connection itself was okay, but maybe an inch or two up, maybe they notched the wire, they did something, or they're using bad wire. So I want to make sure that we talk about wicking, because it's really hand in hand for me, corrosion and wicking. So when you look at wire and you think you're buying really good material and maybe it's got a lifetime warranty, which doesn't mean anything, because it could be a fake warranty, but now you're using cheap China wire, which every distributor is pretty much carrying. So that wire's made from China. It's got soy in it, which attracts rodents. But they use reground plastics. What happens with the reground plastics is as you know how hard they are to strip. They're super stiff right off the reel. And you go back a couple, 2 or 3 years later. I mean, that wire is stiff as a board. It's like even impossible to strip. But if you did go back in and strip it, you notice it is corroded. Now, how did it get corroded? Because you have a good connection. It's because that reground plastic will crack over time. And then when it cracks over time, because it's exposed, even though it's UV resistance, it's not 100%. So it's going to crack. When that cracking opens up into the copper, that's called wicking now. It's the introduction of air. Air is getting pulled in, which then pulls in moisture and condensation, and then it just wicks. And now your whole lighting system is just ruined because of the wicking, because electricity travels around the wire, not through it. And I learned this after my first 2 or 3 years in business, that I would be going back to jobs and looking, and they were dimmer and dimmer and weaker. And it took me a while to figure out that cheap wire is not the way to go. So all my wire's been custom made now for 25 years, and it's not reground. It's 100% virgin plastics. I use virgin plastics, and it's soy free and gluten free. That's another plus. But anyway, so
Real quick on wicking, just in case you haven't seen it or don't know what it is. Basically, when you start stripping the wire back, you'll see, instead of looking all bright copper, it becomes black and brittle.
black.
And I've been on, you can go 6, 10, 12, 20 feet back when you're trying to, find clean copper to make a new connection. And it is absolutely amazing how far that wicking will travel.
Yeah, there it is. Right. Now that's the green. So that really was due to, it'll turn, usually when wicking, it turns black, and that's more of a verde green. Obviously the oxidation just makes the copper turn green like that through a process. But yeah, it's terrible. I mean, you're going to have massive, massive, massive voltage drop. And then what happens besides voltage drop is when it starts going through that action and it starts deteriorating, right? Then it starts sparking and melts down, and it's just a whole ugly process that ruins your lighting job. Which is why, we should bring this point up. We're all going to get called onto a job. The homeowner wants you to, rebuild their system. They want you to, maybe repurpose the fixtures, and okay, maybe, and then we use the existing wire. Well, that existing wire is going to look just like that. So you never want to use typically existing wire, because you don't know what you don't know. And I know I lost my superpower of X-ray vision a few years ago. So I don't know how bad that wire is. But anyway, so I wanted to just mention that. So harsh environments, so coastal areas, which we know 60% of the population or whatever it is lives, within a few miles of the coast. So salty conditions, salt water, salt air, right? Breezes, they really play a lot of damage, on metals. So all metals, with the exception of stainless steel 304, is going to corrode. That's just a fact, right? So harsh environments, coastal areas. So we really kind of want to stay away from metals. I mean, and then and what are the type of metals? Stainless steel, yep, but okay, if you could find a fixture made of 304, it'd be so expensive. So now you're going to go into really aluminums, brass, copper, composites. Brass is probably the number one fixture out there because most of them come from China. It's an easy material to fabricate and manufacture. It's the least expensive metals. Problem with it, you have to have a specific recipe. It can't be more than 15% zinc. Brass is an alloy, so it's made of copper and zinc and then other fillers. So, when I owned Unique Lighting, we went with no more than 15% zinc and 85% copper, and that was it. So it would never start. It's called dezinkification. And what happens is when you put too much zinc in it, which that's what China does, that's what all these cheap manufacturers do, then it starts, I'm going to say, corroding. And it softens up the membranes and the molecules inside the brass and starts turning, gets super weak. I've seen thousands of fixtures crack over time. They start leaking through the lenses because it breaks down the metal. Then they start to corrode, if you will. They start looking terrible. So cosmetically, they're terrible. So, cheap brass China fixtures, you should never use next to the coast. Copper never breaks down, and as long as it's, obviously 99% pure copper, which can't tell you about China copper again, but US copper, it's never going to corrode. It's going to look better and better. Of course, we're starting going to more of the alloys, the shit that goes to Mars, the advanced composite materials. They don't break down, they don't get mold, they don't tarnish, they're good forever. You can have tight tolerances. When you do things in manufacture that require tight tolerances, like for aiming or replaceable lenses and different things, even copper, as you know, can build up and start pitting and different things. So, okay, on the outside finish and things like that structurally, but maybe for tight tolerances, it's kind of a negative. So, yeah, harsh environments, you got to make sure that you're picking the right fixture for the right location, and doing all those things. And the
Yeah, I'll
other
jump in
problem
there
is,
too, because
yeah,
I just want to be clear, like, when you say China does this, I think that can be, you know, a wrong sentiment for a lot of these guys watching it, because no one thinks they're buying a China fixture, right? It's not like they're going to China themselves. Well, some guys do, right? They're buying material, but the bottom line is the manufacturer that's having it done in China is signing off on that recipe, right? To save $1 here, save $1 there.
yeah, that's a super good point. Matt, you go to a company and you think you're buying a quality product, and what you don't realize is they got on a plane, went to China, and are buying. It's like I call it bottles of ketchup. They're buying, the same fixture maybe, 8 other competitors are buying, and it's all China stuff. You don't even realize it because it's an American company pretending they're a manufacturer. But yeah, but 90% of the fixtures that are out there are from China. They are not from the US. So when I've been manufacturing now for over 30 years, and I can give you so many examples of me, and I know lots of other people in the industry that manufacture from China. I mean, they just all of a sudden wake up one day and they change the recipe. I mean, it's like if you're a cook and you got the winning Betty Crocker cake recipe. You don't change the recipe. Well, China changes the recipe every single day, and you don't know it. And the only reason that you find out is because you just screwed 1,000 homeowners and you've got recalls, and what's happening, and why is my brass cracking? Why is this shit falling apart? And finally you get fed up, like I got fed up, and I moved everything to America. But that's what China does. You can have good China, no problem. If you're Apple and you want to charge $1,000 for an iPhone, and you have your own factory over there and your own guardsmen and watchmen and your own thing, yeah, maybe you can successfully manufacture in China, but not landscape lighting. You think you're buying a $40 fixture and you think it's quality from China? Come on, wake up.
1 point for America. Nate, I
Oh my God.
Nate, you're like a walking encyclopedia. I think it's impossible to ask you a question and expect a 30-second answer. I think it's impossible.
Yeah, it could be. I think that's the problem with the industry. You get too many 30-second answers.
So,
Right?
question back on, because I don't live, very close to saltwater at all. How far distance from the coastline do you have to be to where that's like a concern?
It's
That
all
10
depending on wind.
watt,
Wind
50.
carries the salt. I mean, I don't know, 50 miles is probably an extreme, but I mean, you could be, I'm probably 15, 18 miles from the coast, but through the valleys and the mountain ranges, we get a wind every night. And for sure, I can tell that there's salt air because of how some of my brass fixtures have failed and have got Verde green on them. Brass is going to turn because it's removing all the zinc and now it's exposing the copper and they're turning Verde. And the only reason they turn green or Verde green is there's really the salt air. So
Hmm.
that's why you really never see. Say go to Arizona, you never see copper turn into a Verde green because there's no salt air in Arizona. So
That's
yeah,
kind of why the
I'm
Statue of Liberty is green, right? It's just
100%. Yeah. Hmm.
Matt, how close are you to the coast?
no idea.
Oh, so it's that far then.
I mean, I don't know. It could be close. I mean, it's not close enough where I go. It's also not warm here. Like I find people that go to the coast of New York and New Jersey, like it's definitely not. It's definitely an hour or two, but it's not. It's super cold all the time. No thanks.
No, no one goes surfing there in New York, huh? That's not a thing.
Maybe they do, but they're crazy.
Oh, so corrosion material. So if you're close to the coast, within 50 miles or less or something, definitely consider what material you're installing for your customer.
So, so the other thing, real quick, is people have to realize there's a thing called galvanic action, right? Where you have two dissimilar metals that touch each other, and just through a process, those materials will just start naturally corroding, 100%, right? So again, you got to be really careful. Stainless steel above 304 is really the only metal you could ever go and touch another metal, whether it be brass or copper or whatever. So you want likable materials with the same materials and not go two different materials. Like you would never have aluminum into brass, aluminum, right, with copper, things like that. What are you guys laughing about?
That was trying to blow his nose off screen. I just added him right back to the screen. I thought everyone might want to see that.
All right. So anyway, galvanic actions is another thing you got to be concerned about.
Good stuff. I would kind of leave on like the last topic I want to cover. So improper materials isn't just in connections or metals in harsh environments, but I would also say when you're mounting to a tree or a house, there's a particular kind of screw you do or don't want to use, or cable clamp. I was on an install not that long ago, and I took a picture of this. I know like 100% of you guys have always seen something like this. So, but I'll pull it up anyways. Boom. So there's a staple in there. Tree grew around the staple. It's going to start splitting the wire. You just don't use some kind of nail or staple that's not flexible when you're mounting in a tree. Matt, how do you do that when you're, hiding your wire going up a tree? Not hiding
Yeah,
it, you know what I mean?
I use I call them saddles. I don't know if that's the wire saddle, and they just look like little plastic pieces. We screw them into the tree. Wire sits in them, zip tie around them, so the zip tie will break, and the wire will then flap. So they're great. They're 10, 15, 20 bucks, whatever, for a big bag of them on Amazon. And I love them because I have done even my own installations. I've got worse pictures than that wire right there that you just showed, where I have fixtures that live in trees now, not just the wire. So
The tree just engulfed half the fixture,
yeah,
right? Which is
Yep.
really bad for the tree. I mean,
Really bad.
you kill a customer's 200-year oak tree or whatever you guys have there in New York. I mean, that's irreplaceable. That's a major problem.
yeah.
In California, you go to jail for stuff like that. When you kill a tree, you can kill a person, but you can't kill a tree.
Huh. Can imagine. What are you in here? What are you in here for? Improper use of a tree. I killed the tree.
Oh my God, that's funny.
So, Nate, do you have a 30-second answer on how you run wire up a tree?
So in doing this for close to 40 years now, I'm always trying to figure out new methods. So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we kind of started doing a newer method, which was taking the what do they call the eyelet, right? Zip tie. So the one that has a hole in it. So, we put like a deck screw in the tree. So, no corrosion. And then, put the deck screw through that eyelet. Right. And then, so the deck screw is maybe 1.5 inches out of the tree, and then zip tie it right to the wire. And then, of course, it's standing off the tree 2 inches. So it has 10 years of growth. And by that time, the zip tie fails, because that's the key. What Matt's doing, let the zip tie fail. Right. So that's kind of a super fast way we're doing it. It looks really good. You can keep everything. Doesn't matter about how the tree's growing all crazy and different things. So that's our new method now. And I like it a lot. But we're always trying to find better methods.
In that scenario, when you go back for maintenance, well, you loosen the screw a little bit as the tree grows. Easy peasy. And
very, very easy.
A tree swallows up a screw. Well, that doesn't really hurt the tree, right? It's too small. It's not like a
too small. Yeah, too small. But the reason we went to that method is that way you said right now, it's easy for us to back the screw out. There's no girdling around it, right? We can put it in deeper and back it out. So, a lot of times, we do everything when it comes, what are my future considerations, not only for, what's the impact in the environment, how things are going to get, damaged or hurt, but what about me when I come back for maintenance? If I'm up in a tree and I'm having to do maintenance, I would rather take my screw done, back a screw out and be done, put a new zip tie on it. So it's super fast on that regard, because we all know that our employees are lazy. And if it's difficult for them, they're going to always find shortcuts, and then that impacts, obviously our jobs.
All right, that's a good example of an improper tool or use or install methods. Is there anything else before we end this subject that is like something that would fall in this category of our third deadly sin?
So we kind of covered corrosion, wicking, some harsh environment stuff, improper installation. So I think in the big picture, I think in all fairness to everybody, we'll have more segments when it comes to, improper installation, the ramification, what happened. Because if there's one example on a tree, I think there's 50 other examples we could come up with.
Probably. All right, gentlemen. This is a little bit more of a quicker one. If you look below, you'll get a link for our 7 Deadly Sins PDF. If you haven't downloaded it yet, we have that there for you. We have a link on how to make a proper connection, and then a link that Nate just wrote, a PDF on harsh environments and what you need to do when installing in those areas. So feel free, grab that free information at lightingtradeschool.com, and the link is below. All right. Anything else, gentlemen?
No.
Have a good one.
All right.
See you guys.
Have a good week.
All right.
See you next week, actually.
See you next week.